Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Frozen 2. When coming into this movie, the thing that surprised me the most is how unlike the original it is. And you don't really see that from a lot of sequels, specifically sequels that are major tentpoles for major studios, don't really try to be this daring, and Frozen 2 really is. Now, daring in some ways that because it's very different, in other ways it feels like just any other sequel because it is incredibly influenced by The Empire Strikes Back. It very much is influenced by the How to Train Your Dragon sequels, and I'd put the Fortress of Solitude in here as well. In a lot of ways when I was watching it, I was like, man, I like Empire Strikes Back, but like maybe we should stop being influenced by it at this point. And I get it. It was, theoretically a very different film than the original Star Wars. And Frozen 2 does that, and it kind of makes you go, oh, I mean, this is not what I expected. And I don't know if you could necessarily do that, especially now that Disney films that are like big princess things or anything want to have sequels when those are very kind of like closed book kind of movies. Like the only Pixar, certainly with The Incredibles at least, felt like it let itself open to a sequel. I didn't like that sequel, but it still, it felt like you could make a sequel off it. These don't really work that way, and you have to open up a lot of lore and things of that nature to do that. And Frozen 2 does do that, but it was weird to have like the movie begins with a huge info dump of like, oh, there's this other society and like things didn't work out with them and they had magical powers or whatever, and then it's like Frozen 2 and then directly into the existential drama of Olaf, and I was like, what the hell is this movie right now? But these little girls all ate it up. The kids I saw it with an army of kids with Sophie and everybody. The whole family went. She had a great time. The kids had a great time. But I was a little like, this is a little risky. Like, I don't see kids movies having this much faith in their audience, which is actually kind of cool. I will say I respect this movie a lot, and I know when people say they respect a piece of art, that sounds incredibly condescending, but I mean, like, I definitely respect that they did this, and it's kind of cool the way they were able to kind of open up this world and like have like basically this like narrative that was very open to interpretation. People can put LGBTQ things in. It works in almost the same way X-Men did in terms of like powers representing things from everything from LGBTQ issues to race to other things, which makes X-Men such a success and which makes Frozen such a success as well. But it doesn't move as well as the first one. When I saw the first one, it was this huge moment. I loved the songs. I was so surprised by it. I loved that the antagonist wasn't as overbearing as they usually are in Disney princess films. I would say like the antagonist isn't even central to the main conflict in the film. In that one, in this, they don't have an antagonist again, which I actually do appreciate still. But this wasn't a film like once I watched the first Frozen, like I had never heard Let It Go before I saw the first Frozen, which was unlike almost everyone else who saw it was already sick of Let It Go before they saw it. The first time I'd even heard anything from Let It Go was when I saw the film. I really liked that movie, and I liked a lot of the songs. I downloaded the soundtrack even. And as I left the theater, I sort of remember Into the Unknown, and to be honest, I'm being sort of nice about it. Like, I didn't think the songs were as good. I didn't think it was as memorable. Like, the first 25 minutes in Frozen from opening to Let It Go are pretty solid. Like, it moves at such a crazy pace. I really like that opening half hour. But then this, it's like, I understand why people want to do Empire Strikes Back, because it almost feels like, how could you open up this world and make things feel more complicated and human? And you certainly want to do that with a franchise, and it's a good second movie because it opens you up to a lot of worlds, and obviously that franchise is so gigantic and Empire Strikes Back is considered such a classic. But I'm sick of like the whole like, well, it's a sequel, let's split them up, wouldn't that be different? I'm like, well, it's not, because like we do it a lot. Like Guardians of the Galaxy 2 did pretty much the Empire Strikes Back again, and I'm just like, I'm just sort of disappointed by that influence, but I did find it interesting them going back into their past. This is a very like pro-reparations movie, which I like was not expecting. I do think that's kind of like a newer millennial kind of ideal, the ideal of dealing with your past, trying to right these wrongs that past generations were simply just like, well, that was back then, but we don't do that now kind of thing. It feels like people actually want to dig up and really deal with these things And Frozen is very modern in that regard in terms of the initial conflict of it. But I could tell little kids this will represent a lot to them. I'm sure they're going to watch it a million times. I don't think it'll ever be the classic that Frozen is. Even the sort of Annihilation kind of influence on this movie, which was also weird. I mean, it has a lot of weirder kind of influences, but I sort of like that about it. Often, I felt like when I was watching this film, there's a lot of info and a lot of lore they clearly built up and didn't have a real place to sort of dwell in, so they're just kind of like throwing info at you like crazy. I think a lot of directors, Jennifer Lee and Chris Buck, who again returned to this. Jennifer Lee now runs the Disney Animation Studio, so she has a lot of power, and I get that, but they don't work like most directors do, because it seems like they had a lot of lore and history to set up. But unlike when Dean Deblos did that with the How to Train Your Dragon and How to Train Your Dragon 2 specifically, which this film seems to want to be like, when that opened up a lot of lore, visually it was able to do all of those things at once, which is like not easy. And the fact that he was able to do that, I think, made How to Train Your Dragon 2 so impressive. This film visually doesn't do that, and it's sort of interesting because most writer-directors write things because they want to show off that they can do this amazing sequence, or they want to push themselves into a certain thing. And I feel like as writers they did that, but as directors they didn't, because there's certain things like visual cues, like they have this Frozen thing of their dad held by someone and it's a major kind of thing, but it's not that surprising. And it's also so you guys didn't look up, you could have visually, I don't know, there's a lot of things like that where none of the sequences were that amazing, none of the sequences totally blew me away visually. I was a little disappointed as directors. Sure, the backgrounds look nice and everything, but like I've said in countless other reviews recently, I don't think that matters as much as being able to, do something interesting with those visuals. And I didn't really feel that throughout this movie. I mean, certainly, I was surprised how good they were at changing Olaf. Olaf, I didn't think would be, a better character. I was, not looking forward to Olaf at all. And he surprised me. Whereas Kristoff has, sort of an ironic song, which doesn't really work in Frozen, because Frozen's, all about singing your heart out. Frozen's about, let it go, and do you want to build a snowman? And, it's, proclaiming these big emotions that are stuck inside you, and it's he does it ironically. I was I don't know about this, guys. It's fun to be quirky and funny, but I think they push that too far. I think of the Disney sequels and all the Pixar sequels and stuff, this is certainly probably one of the better ones, and it's the only one I would describe as sort of risky and interesting. But I do think they took a page from the book of How to Train Your Dragon, and they took a page from the book of Empire Strikes Back, and they tried to mix it up. And I don't think it made for the greatest results ever, but this was kind of more of an interesting movie, or a respected movie, than anything. It's, I guess, Frozen's The Last Jedi or something like that. I'm curious to hear what the little kids who see it now think of it in 10, 20 years, because I think they'll have a better analysis for it than any of us will. I think that will be the real kind of legacy of this movie, especially because I don't think it's a bad movie. I actually think it's going to hold up to a lot of repeat viewings, especially because certainly when you get these franchises and they know people like Star Wars specifically, but other ones, and they know people are going to rewatch things over and over and over and over and over again, they kind of put a lot of detail in there, because they're well, if you're going to watch this 400 times, I mean, you might as well make it as dense as you can. And when I was thinking about how there's so much in here, and there's so much info, and there's all these things, if you're a little girl who's into Frozen, it'll be a lot of fun to watch this 400 times and really deconstruct the things. And I think watching it once, the first Frozen was just sort of happened, and I don't think they expected to make a franchise out of it. But the second one, they're okay, we're here, we're pretty much a part of culture, so we're gonna be here for a while, and we have to make this dense thing because we know these kids are obsessed with this stuff. Aging the characters is interesting, showing the difference of the world of it, what it means to the world, everything like that. I sort of like that. So in a lot of ways I like this movie, but I was surprised at how little it affected me after leaving it. It was a fun time. I love seeing that movie with Sophie. I think she had an amazing time. She was screaming and yelping and singing and all this stuff with it. And she had, and all the little kids, I saw lots of little girls in Elsa dresses and everything like that. And that was amazing and wonderful. But I don't think in terms of this year in animation, or of even the original Frozen, I don't think it's really that good. I think it's more I respect you, I think you're interesting, but I also kind of look at that as maybe a first watch thing. I'm kind of curious how I'll view this film after I've seen it 400 times on Disney Plus. Maybe I'll feel this is a lot stronger and I was totally wrong. Part of me thinks this film would age wonderfully like a fine wine, but I might be wrong, and it might just turn into vinegar, and the little girls will totally reject this, and Frozen 3 will never happen because they showed at their analytics that it kind of tampered off. Maybe I'm totally wrong about that. I did think it was kind of wonderful what they did with it and how they were so open to doing something different with it. And frankly, I think that's actually pretty cool. Anyone would take a franchise like this and at least be risky with it, particularly one for younger children, and at least like open up the possibilities to different ideas, much like the original Frozen did, which is honestly why I think it was so successful, is because it brought up those ideas of acceptance coming out and the kind of wonderful like explosion of emotions and everything like that. And this definitely is emotional and definitely gets into those things and definitely gets into the past and dealing with that. And as long as Frozen is still about those things, I think it is being probably honest to itself, but sort of honest to itself in a weird way that I'm not sure if it's as exciting and as memorable and as poppy as it used to be. But I sort of think it's what Frozen needs to be if it's going to continue on this road. But I'm not sure if I necessarily am as excited going down it as I was after I saw the first one. So if you've seen Frozen 2 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.